By November 1799, the French Republic was a machine in a state of total mechanical collapse, as the Directory was paralyzed by corruption, a bankrupt treasury, and the looming threat of the Second Coalition. Napoleon Bonaparte, having slipped through the British blockade from Egypt, arrived in Paris to find a political vacuum that was ready to be filled by a shaper of absolute will. He immediately applied the five-step process to the ultimate goal of seizing the state. His goal was the overthrow of the weak Directory. His problem was the legalistic framework of the two legislative councils. His diagnosis was that the government was too fractured to resist a coordinated strike. His design was a legal coup d'état backed by the bayonets of his loyal grenadiers, and his execution was a two-day drama that nearly ended in his execution. Napoleon partnered with the master manipulator Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès, who believed he could use the young general as a sword to establish a new constitutional order. The plot began on the 18th of Brumaire under the pretense of a Jacobin conspiracy. The conspirators convinced the Council of Ancients and the Council of 500 to move their sessions to the Palace of Saint-Cloud outside of Paris to isolate them from the city's radical mobs. Napoleon was given command of all troops in the capital, establishing an immediate internal order of military force. However, on the second day, the 19th of Brumaire, the mechanical logic of the coup began to fail as the Council of 500 realized they were being trapped in a military takeover. When Napoleon entered the chamber to address the deputies, he was met not with applause but with screams of "Outlaw him!" and "Down with the dictator!" The Alpha general, who had faced Austrian cannons at Arcole, was physically assaulted by the politicians and nearly fainted as his biological machine succumbed to the stress of the political abyss. This was the moment of maximum risk, where the entire Napoleonic legend could have ended on a guillotine. The coup was saved not by Napoleon himself, but by his brother, Lucien Bonaparte, who was the president of the council. In a masterstroke of deception and psychological alpha, Lucien rushed outside to the wavering grenadiers and pointed a sword at his brother's chest, swearing he would kill him himself if he ever betrayed the Republic. This restored the believability of the soldiers, who then charged into the chamber with fixed bayonets, clearing the hall of the screaming deputies. By the candlelight of that night, a hand-picked remnant of the legislature met to abolish the Directory and appoint 3 provisional consuls, Sieyès, Ducos, and Napoleon. This was the turning point where the strategy of the central position was applied to the heart of the French government. Within weeks, Napoleon outmaneuvered his fellow consuls using his radical truth and superior administrative speed to draft the Constitution of the year 8, which named him First Consul with near-dictatorial powers. He told the French people that the revolution was over and that he was the realist who would preserve its gains while ending its disorder. The Brumaire Coup proved that in a time of systemic collapse, the man who controls the human machine and the narrative of stability will always defeat a divided committee. Napoleon had successfully executed the manœuvre sur les derrières against the very government he served, moving from a general of the Republic to the master of France. The big cycle of the revolution had ended, and the big cycle of the empire had begun. Focus on the tension of the council chamber. Embrace the frantic energy of Lucien's gamble, and remember that power belongs to the one who can restore order to a machine in chaos. This was the secret of Brumaire, and the reason the 19th century would belong to the House of Bonaparte. In the freezing dawn following the 19th of Brumaire, the political internal order of France had been shattered, and Napoleon Bonaparte was wasting no time in applying his five-step process to rebuild the state machine in his own image. While his co-conspirator Sieyès believed he had found a sword in the young general to act as a figurehead, Napoleon was already diagnosing the structural weaknesses in Sieyès's complex constitutional drafts. Napoleon realized that the external order of France required a single point of failure or success, rather than a divided committee, so he pushed for a radical truth in governance. The need for a first consul with near-absolute executive power. This was a masterclass in political alpha, as Napoleon systematically dismantled the influence of the other two provisional consuls, Sieyès and Ducos, by outworking them in the drafting committees. He spent 16 to 18 hours a day dictating the new constitution of the year 8, proving that his biological machine was as tireless in administration as it was in war. He designed a system that maintained the deception of a republic with universal suffrage and multiple legislative bodies, but in mechanical reality, all power flowed from the first consul. He identified the problem that the French people were exhausted by 10 years of revolutionary disorder, so his diagnosis was to offer them security and property in exchange for their liberty. The new constitution was a masterpiece of structural design that allowed Napoleon to appoint all judges, local officials, and the Council of State, effectively creating a state within a state that answered only to him. To ensure the believability of this new regime, he held a national plebiscite where the results were famously massaged to show a near-unanimous public mandate for his rule. This was the turning point where Napoleon transitioned from a military shaper to a national legislator. He immediately tackled the abyss of the French economy by founding the Banque de France and stabilizing the currency, providing the financial alpha needed to fund the coming wars. He also reached out to the Catholic Church through the Concordat, realized that religion was a powerful social glue that could restore the internal order of the fractured French provinces. While the old Jacobins whispered about tyranny, the common people saw a man who was bringing the logic of the soldier to the chaos of the bureaucracy. Napoleon moved his headquarters into the Tuileries Palace, the former home of the kings of France, signaling that the big cycle of the revolution had reached its final synthesis. He was no longer just a general of the Republic. He was the grand architect of a new European order that would soon challenge every monarch from London to Vienna. The Brumaire Coup had provided the opportunity, but the creation of the consulate provided the mechanical engine for the Napoleonic Empire. He had successfully applied the strategy of the central position to the French government, and now he was ready to turn that engine back toward the battlefields of Europe. Focus on the administrative grind, embrace the cold logic of the new constitution, and remember that a leader who restores the machine is the one the people will follow into the next war. This was the secret of the consulate, and the reason the 19th century was about to become the age of Bonaparte.